Welcome to the Why Didn't I Know podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jenny Martin. And in this episode, we're talking about the Epstein Files Part 2. In the last episode, I talked about the fact that the disclosures that are coming out in the Epstein files reveal a hidden occult knowledge that members of the ruling elite throughout the entire world have known about, that sex can open a portal to other dimensions. Now, this is done in very sadistic ways to open a portal to demonic energy that they feed off of. But originally, this was about alchemy in early Christianity and sexual alchemy. And I have gone into this actually in more detail on my Substack. I'll link that below. It's Dr. Jenny Martin on Substack. You can get some more information and actually the books and references in that essay. But for now, in our part 2 here, I want to share with you that I have been reading the Epstein files, not all 3 million documents, but you can do a keyword search on the Department of Justice website, and I've done that. Quite disturbing to find out that some of the top consciousness researchers, names that are quite well known in consciousness research, they are named in these documents. Epstein was hanging around with people who were doing research on consciousness, and it makes me think that the original DMT research, the psychedelic DMT in the human brain, was done in New Mexico in the 1990s. And that was actually funded by a branch of the Freemasons. It was actually funded by the Scottish Rite. And this research was done in New Mexico in the 1990s after DMT research hadn't been done for decades. But in the 90s was the time when Epstein went to New Mexico, and he set up his other place where he exploited people, and that was called Zorro Ranch. He had Epstein Island, Little St. James, and then he had Zorro Ranch. So I'm not tying in the fact that the DMT research was part of his domain. I don't have evidence on that. I'm just saying it's bizarre that there was this Scottish Rite funding this research on DMT. And what we find in the Epstein files is he certainly wasn't your typical sexual predator. This was not someone that just was perverted or just had a sexual addiction or even was just trying to make a business out of it. And of course, there's the implication that he was working for governments and was running a blackmail operation. But beyond that, there was something that was very obvious reading through the documents, is that he was doing it with a lot of information about how to shift consciousness. He was in conversation with some of the top people, such as Rupert Sheldrake, who discovered morphogenic fields. And he was really looking at how consciousness can produce paranormal effects, how consciousness can be extended in terms of the idea of immortality. I mean, this all links back to the idea that this was someone who was very much looking at things from an occult perspective. And occult simply means hidden. It doesn't mean anything nefarious, but certainly the way he was approaching it, manipulating people against their will and against their knowledge. Some of the really horrific things that have come out this week was a researcher at UCLA that emailed Epstein on how to get infants to suck harder. And what he found out, this researcher, was that if the mother's voice is played for the infant, it will have a stronger sucking reflex than if it's just another female voice. Now, why on earth would a convicted pedophile be interested in that type of research? It's not hard to figure out and connect the dots. And thankfully, there's been people that have protested down at UCLA, and that particular researcher, I believe, is not going to be employed by the university much longer. But there needs to be a lot more than just somebody losing their job. We're hearing about people in different corporations this week resigning, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that. It's not just people in politics, and it's certainly not the Republicans or the Democrats. It's across the board who were affiliated with Epstein. And some of the more surprising revelations are individuals like the Dalai Lama. Yes, the Dalai Lama was named in the Epstein files 169 times. And that's quite shocking for most people. But it goes to tell us that seeing anyone as superior to the rest of us, like seeing them as a guru, that they're further advanced than the rest of us, that is going to change, I think, to some extent after all of these disclosures are disseminated to the public and people really become aware of what this is telling us. Because how can you take somebody's spiritual advice when they have been engaged with someone who raped, tortured, and murdered? Yes, murdered. There are emails, they have gone back and forth about where to deposit bodies on the Zorro Ranch after he choked teenagers to death during a sexual ritual. And there seems to be almost a cavalier attitude towards torture and murder in the emails, as if it's a sport. And yeah, this is very dark, but I will talk about some of the brighter side. And I've also talked about some of the brighter side in my Substack. So the other person that was quite surprising to me in the Epstein files was Deepak Chopra. I expected politicians and business leaders, but I didn't expect someone who was quite well known as a spiritual teacher, a spiritual leader. But here he is in the Epstein files, emailing Epstein on numerous occasions. And one email that has circulated online is the one where he says to Epstein, "God is a construct, but cute girls are real." And these types of emails really paint a very different picture from the persona that is portrayed in his books, in his teachings. And it is not surprising that after this revelation came out, this disclosure this week, he turned off his comments on his social media accounts. I've already seen people saying that they're getting rid of their Deepak Chopra books and so forth. But this is not about incriminating any one particular person. Bear in mind that a lot of these people that have been named in the Epstein files, nobody has been brought to justice yet. Nobody has been charged with anything yet, but they have all pretty much said that they were unaware of what he was doing, even though he was convicted as a sex trafficker and a sex offender the first time in 2008. And some of these emails are well after that are part of the 3 million documents that came out this week. It's hard to actually say that you didn't know who he was because he already had convictions for those things earlier on. But most of the people are not, I don't know anyone that's actually admitting that they did anything wrong. Everyone is saying that was named in these documents that they didn't know what he was into and they had just one brief meeting, but the actual email correspondence show something much more alarming. And that's the bigger topic that I wanted to talk about here, because a lot of people are talking about this online, and I know it's not reached all the major broadcast networks. I think that is coming as soon as we see more investigations and we see more people actually being prosecuted for these crimes. That is coming, I do believe. As this reaches more of a mass awareness, what happens when you find out that some of these universities doing consciousness research were actually helping aid a guy that was torturing babies? Like, how do you deal with that? How do we deal with the fact that the people funding research on consciousness were actually involved in really dark activities to destroy people? But they were taking money at the same time to fund the research. How do we deal with that? So how do you deal with the fact that maybe your favorite actor or maybe your favorite actress has actually been part of this really dark, sadistic club? Or maybe the musician that you have followed for years is part of this dark web as well. Well, I think that's all going to be coming to light in the coming months. And I do believe there will be prosecutions and criminal charges for this, because there's a growing sense online of people not wanting to let this go by, and for good reason. How can we pay taxes here in the US to people that are doing these kinds of things? There's going to be a real backlash unless people are held accountable. But beyond those kinds of criminal repercussions, which are 100% necessary, there's no spiritual bypassing this. There's no letting people off the hook. And I do not believe we're going to just see this buried. It's gaining too much traction, and there's just too many people involved. And that's a very hopeful thing, that practices that have been allowed to continue for a long time are now going to be brought to an end. The criminal prosecutions need to happen, but there's a deeper part of this that I'm interested in, and that is, how do we heal the psyche of culture, of people who have thought the world ran in a certain way, thought that when you pay your taxes, you could put your trust in whoever's leading, and that your favorite musician was just a good person and they weren't doing anything really bizarrely dark behind closed doors. But when you realize that there's some other reality actually happening, and this actually comes to public awareness, it can be quite depressing. It can lead to a conclusion that we're all just run by evil doers, and there's not much to look forward to. And that's not the perspective that I'm coming from, because if you believe in a higher power, if you believe in a divine intelligence, first of all, it's not responsible for all of this dark goings on. It's not controlling people. We have free will, so we can do things like this to other people. And you get away with it for a while until you don't. And then the consequences need to be paid. And we're living at a really historic time, because from every indication, these kinds of dark occult practices have been going on for a long period of time, and nobody has paid attention. Nobody has known. There haven't been the whistleblowers. There hasn't been the openness and communication. It's one thing that technology has given us, the ability for a independent person to send out information online and have people's eyeballs on it. So the internet has really provided the opportunity for us to have that kind of decentralized communication and to start questioning the mainstream media about what their narratives are. And so we're at a unique time in history where this is collapsing in front of us. Some of what we thought were trusted people and had our best interests in heart are not. And to find out that sexuality and the supernatural and evoking supernatural power through ritual abuse is happening is quite a eye-opening thought for a lot of people. But there is a silver lining, and the silver lining is sometimes we don't know the good, the divine, until we see the opposite of it. As somebody posted on social media the other day, that if there is ultimate evil, which the Epstein files pretty much prove there is ultimate evil. I believe the silver lining in all of this is that we're going to start to come to terms with the fact that we are living in a supernatural world. We are not just dealing with the physical reality, the material reality. There is more to this existence than the physical reality. And these people that run in these circles that are doing these sadistic things to children and to victims, they know that through the act of life force energy, the act of sex, and it's certainly not consensual, but the act of torture and sex, they are siphoning off life force energy from their victims. The silver lining is that sex is more than physical. And when we actually treat sex as our spiritual path to align with the divine, and we have a sexual experience that is full of love, and it's definitely consensual, but it's love and it's pleasure and it's passion, the exact opposite of what these characters in the Epstein files are doing. But when we engage in sex from this spiritual intention, we actually align with the highest and best within us. And we align with a supernatural presence. It's not just the divinity in you and your partner, which is more of a tantric idea, but in the way that I'm teaching it is based on Mary Magdalene's alchemy teachings, which is Mary the Jewess, the first historical alchemist. And there we find alchemy as sexual. And it's not just the two of you engaged in this, seeing the divine in each other, but you're actually bringing in a third presence. And the elite people that are doing these dark rituals, they very much know it's not just the dark energy within themselves or trying to pull out terror within the victim. They know they're opening a portal to this demonic force that is like the presence of the third. Well, the same thing happens when we do this in alignment with God, or whatever you want to call that presence of unconditional love. When we engage in sexual alchemical ritual that honors the divine, then we are invoking the presence of the third. And if there's one silver lining that can come from all of this, is the reclamation of what human sexuality is. It's far more than just a physical hookup. It's far more than just an emotional experience of feeling great. It's actually a path of transformation. And these people have used it as a path of destruction. There's no way that you can actually treat another human in the inhumane ways they treat them during their dark occult rituals and have a state of true happiness. These people are not living in a state of peace and a state of ultimate conscious liberation. Not at all. There's just no way that you can rape and torture people and have organic love, joy, peace, happiness, calmness. That is not going to happen. you have constant torment. And the other thing is, once you open up that portal to the other side, to the darkness specifically, you might receive some temporary benefits. But ultimately, there's something to be said for selling your soul to the devil, so to speak, because you might receive some benefits, but there's always a price to pay. There's always something that you have to give up, and there's always something that you're going to have to pay very heavily for. And ultimately, there can be justice on earth for the crimes that you commit. And I believe we are in the midst of seeing that finally now. So there's no getting off scot-free. There is laws in this universe that if you harm and if you intend malice on another person, it will find its way back to you. That is absolutely a fact. And compare that to the alchemy as taught by Mary the Jewess, otherwise known as Mary Magdalene, which is Christian alchemy before the 4th century. There is no sense that you have to pay for the good that you receive, pay for the advancement that you receive, pay for any benefit that comes to you. There's no having to suffer and having to endure pain to move forward. And there's also no sense that it's through darkness that we produce the alchemical results. That's a distortion of Mary's alchemy, that darkness does not produce anything. Light produces more light. So light does not come from the darkness. Now, it's Carl Jung, his interpretation of Mary's work brought about that whole sense that you have to go through the dark night of the soul and that you have to focus on your shadow self. But that's not what she taught. And sadly, that version of alchemy infiltrated all of Christianity. There's the focus on the gory death of Jesus and having to pay a price for everyone else's upliftment, everyone else's salvation, to use a Christian term. And those are dark, occult, alchemical frames of viewing spiritual advancement, but they're not what Mary taught, and I believe it's not what Yeshua actually taught either. It wasn't this focus on suffering to be able to attain any miracle, to be able to attain anything in life or to move ahead. And it certainly wasn't like some interpretations that desire and sexuality must be overcome and the body must be overcome. Those are also not part of what Mary taught. So there's a really big opportunity at this time when all of these Epstein file revelations are coming to light. These disclosures are being made on an ongoing basis, and they're percolating up, and people are combing through these 3 million documents. And it's necessary. It's necessary for us to understand and diagnose the problem before we can look to solutions. And the problem is we've had a false understanding of what sexuality is. We've been told that it's either recreational or it's about having kids, but it's not anything more than maybe having an emotional connection with someone. There's not anything more profound, and it's just really a physical act, and it doesn't have any effect on your consciousness. And so we're at this time of disclosure when all of this really uncomfortable information is coming out. But ultimately, it will serve a higher purpose, because for society to advance, for the consciousness of the planet to be raised, it is essential that we have a new understanding about sexuality. These people named in the files practicing these occult sexual practices they realize that sex is a portal, and they were doing it for nefarious reasons. But what does that tell us? That there's something much more here. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, Epstein was very interested in consciousness. Now, he was trying to break and manipulate the consciousness of his victims and trying to advance his own consciousness, but that is actually never going to work, because if you think that there isn't a divine source for all of this, you are mistaken. Our consciousness is sourced from the divine, and peace and well-being and love and everything that makes life actually enjoyable only come about when we live in accordance to the heart, when we live in accordance to a recognition of being plugged into a source of unconditional love. And as much as you study the mechanics of consciousness and learn about the science of consciousness, you won't enjoy the peace, the happiness, the joy, unless you are plugged into your heart and plugged into that source of love. So there is an opportunity for a new understanding of sexuality to come about, where we realize that there's a lot more there for all of us. With sexual alchemy, in this way I'm talking about it here, it's not about creating a child, but creating a higher level of consciousness. And we can take back that power that has been used to lower the consciousness of humanity. We can take back that energy and, with our conscious awareness, bring a new consciousness to the planet. So this can be actually a very powerful shift to bring a new awareness to the planet. We're about to embark on a new understanding collectively of what sex is. It's not just physical. It can open a portal. And when we come from the spiritual intention to commune with the unconditional love, the light, when we only allow ourselves to be treated with kindness and love, when there's true passion and connection and respect for each other, the couple, the two people having sex, and of course it's consensual, but when all of that is there, and you've let go of any resentment towards your partner, or you're certainly not afraid, you're feeling safe, when all of those things are put together, when there's that level of connection and attraction and just really being able to sink into your present experience, your body, and be loved and give love and enjoy all the sensual pleasure of being together. These are the ingredients that allow the presence of the third, the presence of the divine, to fill the room. And it's that is going to shift society, shift the planet into a higher vibration. So even though things look dark, even though some of the disclosures that are coming out can be pretty disturbing, just know that there is an overall possibility here. I mean, we have to make it happen. There's no savior that's going to come and show up and change everything for us. We're the ones that make the choice to do this. But we can take back this life force energy and make sure it's used for good. Make sure we only engage in sexual acts that were respected and were loved and were honored, and that we teach young people to honor each other in this way as well. So I'll leave you with that for now. Thank you so much for joining me. Please rate and review this podcast. That helps a lot for more people to find this out. And I look forward to talking with you next time. Bye-bye for now.